Step into realms where the heart takes flight, where strategy meets the edge of night. The Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Prepare your mind. Now be our guest.
On today's episode, I was very excited to have the opportunity to meet in person James Jackson, my friend from Tabletop Misfits, and we had an excellent conversation. So I look forward to sharing that with you. Enjoy.
Hey, I'm Tabletop Misfits. You've seen me over on Twitch. I had Robert from Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology over on our show about a year and a half ago. He's also been on one of our actual live shows. He was with when we were doing Plots in Darkenhaven season 1. Tabletop Misfits has grown over the last 2-3 years now, and we went from running 3 or 4 shows to, I say grow, but it actually is going to sound worse, but we'll get there in a second. We went from running 2 or 3 shows all the way down to running 1. Because life got busy. And things in my personal life started to swarm into everything. And then on top of that, we had 4 of our partners step away because their lives were busy. And we said, well, our token show, our stable show, the show that we've held strongest on is Tavern Talks. And we're now 129 episodes strong.
Nice.
And keep moving from there. But I had an opportunity show up in August of last year. And an opportunity that came from a guest from Tavern Talks, and he said, hey, do you want to be our new GM for season 3? And I said, well, what does that look like? And he goes, well, you won't be running from your show anymore. You'll be running on Gen Con TV's official Twitch channel. It goes from my channel, who has 700, 800 followers, to Gen Con TV, who has 41,000 followers.
Good.
So the exposure was incredible. And playing with players whose main goal is to tell just an incredible story. And they're all great players, but there's something different when everybody is on the same page, that we're not just here just to herd cats.
Right.
We're actually here to tell a really good story. And I saw that when we started playing with Dress to Quest, and all the players working together, not only in character, but out of character, which I thought was really a unique experience outside of everyday running D&D. I mean, you and I both know that Dungeons and Dragons is kind of usually the back of the house with your friends. You kind of do what you want, but at the same time, there's this just simple portion of nothing really is heavily solid outside of your group, right? And working with people that see that and want to show that off, but at the same time want to enjoy the storytelling portion, because we did have an audience. We had to change a couple things up, but really it didn't change much for the most part. We have a couple things, like if a player, and I didn't realize this, and I started talking to a bunch of other podcasts and stuff that do this, a lot of it is your players reaching out to you before a show and going, hey, I want to have a conversation with this character. Can you put space in it?
Right.
And I don't really think that's scripting. I don't think that's railroading. And I don't think that's really changing the way we play Dungeons and Dragons. It's just preparation changes a little bit, because sometimes if you're in a home game and you run past a certain period of time, you're like, oh, we can pick it up next time.
Right.
Right. For this, you want to have a complete story. So if somebody said, hey, can you slot in 15 to 30 minutes for us to have this dialogue between the 2 players? I don't know how long that's going to go, but what I want to make sure is that I leave that space for those players to tell their story and run with it from there.
I think one of the things I've definitely noticed, and I've mentioned this a lot lately, is the best stories are always the ones where both the DM and the players are involved collaboratively in telling the story. Right. When everybody is having their input in and their ways of shaping the world are involved, everyone's more interested in the game. But I think that the games where the narrative takes center stage over character stats and dice rolls and even things like that, like when the story is king, you have the most fun.
Right.
Because it's like being part of your favorite book or fantasy series. Like when the story rules, everybody's having a good time.
Yeah, I completely agree. So that's something that we started experimenting with, and we started talking about, well, what does that look like? What do you want your character? And it was interesting because this is a setting that's open to everyone. You know, we're playing in Rime of the Frost Maiden, which you can download on D&D Beyond or go pick it up at Amazon. But the cool thing is, though, is when the players started giving me backstories, it was more of a, how do I take the backstory they have and kind of twist it so that it makes sense in the setting.
Right.
So we have characters now that I've tied to this point. Every character has not only a grounding in the setting, they have a specific portion of Rime of the Frost Maiden that is matched to their character in one way, shape, or form or the other. You know, we have our barbarian who found out, I think in episode like 12 or 13, that they actually have heritage to the frost giants of Icewind Dale. And when that happened, she was okay with it because she's, oh, this is awesome. But it also immediately tied into the actualness of the frost giants' claim for Icewind Dale and how the Goliaths and all that stuff work there.
It is something I guess, ad nauseum sort of said on my show over and over and over again, is tying the characters' backstories to the world that is created makes the game immensely more immersive. When it matters to them, because it is something that the player themselves put time into creating the backstory, and then they see their own work as reflected in the lore and the story that's being told of the world, it's so much more meaningful. Right? And they want to interact with things a lot more. It's a lot easier to give them a plot hook that they're interested in when it's something that speaks personally to them. And it's not just, oh, well, you know, the Frost Giants, if they have no tie to the party, there's not as much of a directive for the party to move in that direction. But when it matters to them and when it's something that is, they put time into creating themselves and then they see it reflected in the world, they're definitely going to be more invested in it.
Yeah. And we can, oh my goodness, I could talk like that about that forever, because the one thing I've learned more so is tying the party's current situation to the next plot hook makes so much easier of a chance for them to buy into it than it does you trying to just throw them out a bunch of plot hooks and being expecting like, oh, which one sounds good to you?
Right.
Now, we've got characters now that are starting to get these very long form communications and investments into NPC characters. And when those characters reach out for help,
right,
there's not even a question anymore. They're like, oh no, so-and-so needs help. Like, we got to go make sure. And I think the cool thing with that is actually that no matter what, it allows for that experience of nostalgia to continue to come back and forth in your story, because you might, like we're dealing with it right now. My players started in a small town called Koenig, which is a small fishing village. One of the characters is actually tied to that city or that town. But that's where they started, and that's where they did their first set of missions, and they really started to get to know the NPCs of the town. And then they left, and then they got a note that said that there's problems at character. And it wasn't like oh, well, let's wait, let's clean up these last 3 problems. It was an immediate change in reaction. I was like, oh no, we need to get there now and see what's wrong. And I thought that was so cool.
We'll be right back.
Hey, Cyclithids, if you love the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast and want to help keep it alive, there are a ton of ways you can support the show. Join us on Patreon for exclusive content like NPC character sheets, early access to new products, and even first looks at DM's Assistant app. You can also grab gaming-inspired merch on the Etsy shop, Games for Games, or pick up one of my books, The Player's Handbook to Real Life, or Session Zero, the DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in any system. And even if financial support isn't in the cards for you, you can still help by sharing this show, leaving reviews, or introducing new players to our community. Links are always in the show notes, and thank you for being the heart of our adventure. That is really cool. I think it speaks really interestingly to me the way that we kind of view this similarly, excuse me, because I have had a lot of conversations with people that don't put a lot of investment into the backstory or the characters' ideas. And there are those DMs out there that are just sort of like, the story is mine and we're going to follow my story. But to me, that doesn't make an interesting story, right? If you want a story that's just yours, write it. You know, you don't need to have other people involved in it. It's that collaborative portion and everybody being together and building something truly unique that you could never make on your own, because you've got now 3, 4, 5, however many players you have, different ideas and different concepts, different goals, all melded into one really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about utilizing not only homebrew, I think, is one of those things where a lot of people will hold that gatekeeping a little bit tighter because that's their world. Like, that's my baby. That's my world. I don't want to see my world be destroyed. But at the same time, it's unique to see it in a way where there is a world already. Like, we're playing in Icewind Dale. We're playing in a world that's known and is created and has story behind it. So how do you get the characters involved, right? You have to find ways that their backstory, because I don't tell my characters, hey, go read Icewind Dale and then go build your backstory. No. Hey, these are some ideas, these are some areas, these are some factions that are going to be in the world. You make the story up, and we'll tie it together as we find ways to do so. And then of course, you know, you have the third form of storytelling, which is the dice, because you don't know what a dice is going to tell.
Absolutely.
And I think when you put all three of those together, you definitely come up with something that's outside of the normal, and better off. I think it's now showing people that a different story can be told even when the same story is being told.
Yes, very true.
That to me is really cool. And I think that's where we're going to start seeing, and I don't think it's as uncommon as it probably felt years ago. But I'm curious if when we started seeing floods of the same movie types or the same book types, and then all of a sudden you get these strange off the walls that hit the emotion differently, or they hit the reactions differently. I'm curious if something like a tabletop RPG was implemented because it takes your mind away from everybody doing the exact same thing and just putting a skin over top of it. I mean, look at this. We had for, years and years in the 90s and 2000s, we had all these different types of cartoons and stuff. And then all of a sudden things just kind of slowed down. And then seeing an adult cartoon like Critical Role show up and watching how it's designed and how it's portrayed and thinking back and going, none of my books were this detailed. None of the cartoons were this dedicated. I think it's because, like you said, it's a collaborative effort. It's not one mind. And a lot of times you see those books and those comics and things like that. It's written by one person completely straight through.
It's something you mentioned where you were talking about all the different stories that are happening, being played simultaneously around the world. They're all playing the same story, but they're playing it in different ways. And we've kind of taken that approach, my group, on the Forgotten Realms in general, right? So we are very familiar with playing games in the Forgotten Realms. It's one of our favorite settings. But generally speaking, when we play a game there, we don't say we're playing in the Forgotten Realms. We say we're playing in our Forgotten Realms, because we have a tendency to keep all of the history and all of the characters and everything that we've done around our table as part of the lore of the world going forward. So when something happens in one of our stories, that tends to be lasting for the rest of our games going forward, as long as they're happening in chronological order, which we tend to play. But for example, one big thing that happened in ours was we had a big campaign where we had players that stopped Spell Plague, which was when 4th edition came out, right? So in our Faerunian world set, Spell Plague never happened, which is such a huge part of 5th edition now. But in our Forgotten Realms, that never took place. So it's a very different setting, even though we can play the same stories and the same characters and even run a lot of the same adventure paths. We have a very different world that we're playing in than other people. So I think that's just a kind of a fun way of of keeping things unique to your group.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because you even look at the modules, like let's take one of the most popular modules out there right now, Curse of Strahd.
Mm-hmm.
You can go on any Twitch channel nowadays and you can find somebody playing Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, every single one of those are astronomically different.
Yeah.
You know, you've got people that are playing it almost like a Scooby-Doo mystery. You've got people that are so dark and, you know, it feels more like an actual like Castlevania game.
Right.
And then you've got the hodgepodge in between, right? And I think to me that is so cool to think that we aren't using Dungeons and Dragons as an end all be all, but it is definitely become a skeleton that we're able to utilize.
Well, we even ran that. We ran a Pathfinder adventure path, Rise of the Rune Lords. We even chose to run that same adventure path 3 different times with our group, run by different people, just to see how the story would be different and how different DMs would approach it. And it was vastly different every single time. And so I think that is like, it's not just the people playing, it's the decisions the dungeon master makes with how to respond. And of course, like you said, it's the dice. Like the dice can take the story in all sorts of infinite numbers of directions.
Right. Yeah, you could expect
that you may not
it
plan.
to go some way, and then all of a sudden you've got a curveball, and you're like, okay, now I got to figure out how.
Yeah, for sure. Always that surprise dice roll that something either goes incredibly well or incredibly terrible.
Right, and that can be as bad as, you know, in a lot of cases, depending on how much you are really focusing on the story of that has already been written and how much you're focusing on what the next story is, you could potentially cut an entire story arc out because you killed the wrong person.
Right.
You know, and then all of a sudden you have to now figure that out of, you know, do I utilize the same tool set? Do I completely cut this from my story? What implications is this going to mean 3 chapters down?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so I've been talking on the show a lot recently about what I call it the roadmap method, which is basically, you know where you're starting and as a DM, you know where your eventual plan is. Mm-hmm. You think of it like a road trip. You have the map, but your players are making all the decisions about everywhere you want to go sightseeing or all the pit stops that you want to make. And you're just slowly veering them back towards the direction you want the game to go in. And I think in a lot of ways, like if you look at like Baldur's Gate 3, the game, it's very similar. Like you can kill off basically any character in the game. The writers were so brilliant in adapting the story to figuring out a way of whoever's alive and whoever's gone to still have you find a way back onto that road moving towards the final destination. Yeah. It's really cool when you can do that in a game as well. And I think it just goes to show you that even if things go wildly off rails, you can find a way to navigate towards the story or the outcome you were looking for.
I mean, as long as you understand the driver for whatever the direction you're going, it shouldn't be very difficult for you to say, okay, instead of so-and-so knows this information, now this person knows this information, right? Like, but a lot of times you will also see people where they'll be like, nope, I'm going to take this entire arc out now because, you know, they've killed off an entire section of the game to them. And I think that's interesting too, because then now you have this gap here that's going to be filled by other players in another game setting, which is cool to me because now maybe 6-7 years down the road, I'm in a different area and somebody goes, hey, I want to play Curse of Strahd, let's say. Okay. But they never took us to the area where the hags make the pies.
Right.
Didn't know the hags made pies.
Right. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I've got this new experience going on, and what is that going to trickle down to throughout the entirety of the campaign? Mm-hmm. So yeah, things like that they blow my mind to think that those are opportunities we can utilize in order to just build new stories.
And it is just so amazing to me too that I don't think there ever really are 2 tellings of a story that are exactly the same. Even when I read a novel for a second time or a third time, some novels I've read 5-6 times, you see different things each time that you read it. You either pick up on something different or you're in a different place in life where a different part of the story speaks to you.
Right.
And I think that is just something so amazing about stories. Even if it's the same words, you can find vastly different meaning in those words.
And I think that is the one unique thing about books and about stories that you kind of lose in movies and in TV shows. I can watch the same TV show over and over again. And unless it is a very, very deep TV show, I'm watching the exact same thing over and over again. And it's not going to change my thought process or anything like that. Same with movies. I mean, I could probably watch Waterboy 1,000 times and never get anything new out of Waterboy other than the fact that it was funny.
Right. Well, I think, yes, to a degree. I think there's a few exceptions. I think the exceptions would be, like you said, those things that are very deep. Because I definitely know now, I'll go back and watch something that I haven't watched in years, and I will see as a father now that there's a touching, like, father-daughter moment that will really get me emotionally invested that I never had a connection with before. Gotcha. But that is, different life places, different emotional depths.
Right.
But yeah, I think other than big things like that, you're right. Video type media, it does stay a little more stagnant in that respect.
And that might be because it gives you that it affects not only one of your senses, but multiple senses at the same time. So you don't have as much requirement to have to expand that thought process, right? Like if I'm reading a book, the only thing I'm really using is I wouldn't even say sight, but it's like your comprehension of the words, right? Like my reading skills. Like with a book, you have that opportunity that maybe a word speaks differently to you now, or maybe a passage in a book or a chapter in a book now goes, okay, I see it from this point of view. Now I see it from this point of view. The other cool thing with a book, though, is that sometimes books are so widespread that you didn't see it from the butcher's son's point of view because you didn't know anything about the butcher's son the first time you read it through, until you got to the middle or the end of the book.
Oh, absolutely.
And now you're going back reading it a second time to go, oh, so that's what they meant by this, because he's seeing it in a different eyesight.
Yeah.
Like huge picked up over the last couple of weeks. Really, the last couple of weeks, I started getting back into fantasy audiobooks because with all the traveling I've been doing, it was a better way for me to be utilizing my time, especially on planes where I've tried to write and I've tried to read, and oh my goodness, I either get motion sickness or I start to fall asleep. But I can toss an audiobook on and listen for hours and just absorb those words. I've just a different point of view, and listening to the depths of people's stories. I'm like, wow, like you thought through this, 1,000 different ways before you probably wrote this. And kudos to those people that can write those fantasy books that are just so in depth with folds and folds of storyline.
It is amazing. And they're so good at capturing like the whole concept. And we do it as DMs, right? We world build and we create characters for our players to interact with. And we do this I'll call it on sort of a micro scale, right? Because we're not having to produce it all in one giant thing for somebody to just be handed and say, here's the whole world I created. But you get to do it in small portions. But I do think over, course of a 2-year campaign, the story you tell becomes just as big, if not bigger. Yeah. But it is really amazing how people are able to world build and create magic systems. That's one of the ones that fascinates me the most, like the creativity of some of the modern authors in the way that magic works or unique power works. Some of those people are so brilliant.
I'm so hooked on Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon Sanderson's a great example.
Books. Yeah. Oh my goodness. His Cosmere series.
Yes.
I read one book and then went and bought his entire TTRPG this last month ago.
That is...
I kickstarted that immediately.
Yep. Yeah, like our whole group jumped on that one. That one was... we love the Cosmere, all the stuff in it. And he's another one who's very good at creating unique power systems and unique political systems. And
the politics in that book is incredible. It got me thinking multiple ways of, okay, what does this political view, especially in things like Icewind Dale, where survival is a key.
Yeah.
And I started looking at similarities to that, to the third book for the Mistborn series, where they're dealing with the idea that the ash is never going to stop and it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, okay, what is this feeling? What are these feelings that people are having now that there is this sense of utter dread on its way? There is no stopping it. There is no way to resolve it. What is this driving people to do?
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, some of the ideas that are coming from that book alone, I'm like, okay, my games are going to change drastically just by the thought process of that. And I can't imagine, if I would have taken some of those things they tell you in school, where read a book a month, where that would have led me,
Right.
especially in this world where we write all the time for our own stories and our own, but to put those concepts and to put those ideas into those stories, it's going to vastly change what those stories look like going forward.
I think, and you make a good example there with the Mistborn trilogy. It was so unique in so many ways, but I think one of my favorite things about it was, as you're getting towards the end of the series, you're realizing that the person who you considered to be the main villain from book one was actually doing some things to really try and save the world.
Oh yeah.
And it just it's a good plot twist. It's the kind that I really like, that makes you think and go, oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's wild. Like, yes, of course they were villainous and evil in their
Play
approach,
that out
but
so far.
and to see it with the long view, like, wasn't so bad after all, right? Really fascinating, very well done.
Yeah. And I don't even know how many books are in. I'm on book 3 right now.
Yeah, 3 in the original
Okay.
trilogy, and then they've got a subsequent trilogy that happens some years later.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I'm on the 3rd one right now, and I'll probably finish it on the way back from my flight back home. But yeah, those things are. I mean, I could talk. Just 3 books has gotten me thinking about so many different things. Considering, if I was an all-powerful being, like the things I created and like the systems that they've come up with, and now this divine entity, and as much as it's a bad thing, it really gives a very strong look at what a person who has that oversight can do to manipulate in their own.
Yeah.
You've got a character in there who is devoted. I mean, the best way to put it would be, this is your high-level cleric or your high-level paladin. Now you're finding out that everything you believed in is complete and utter confusion.
Right.
I couldn't imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to, if you put it in terms of a game that you're playing in and you've been dedicated to a deity or an entity or even a philosophy or whatever, and then you end up finding out basically everything you've believed, everything you fought for is different than you expected. What do you do? Like, what does that do for the character? Even for the player, like, talk about a paradigm shift and having to look at things differently.
Scale. I mean, look at Ford in season 2 of Critical Role. You go from the warlock who's getting the power from Ukutoa to going to the Wild Mother as a paladin. He's 2 very different shifts in what understandings he was looking at. Okay, I get my power from here. Oh, wait, I can get my power here otherwise, and I'm not serving this being that wants to destroy the world. That to me, it's just the concepts they're utilizing, I think, is the coolest part, because instead of you saying, this is my backstory, this is the very setting, this is what I want to do with my character, and this is my only goal. I think one of the things I want to do with my players is, what is something you want to experience during your journey? If it is, like when you say your goal, I want to know what your actual goal is. I don't want to know, I want to kill this dude. No. Why?
Yeah. Right.
What is the drive? What is your driving factor for this character? I think if somebody, and I know we have a couple characters that one of them literally looked at me as, it's survival. What does that mean though? What does survival mean in a game like that where, that is their number one goal? Does that mean that when push comes to shove, you're the one that's going to run? Like, and what kind of story is that going to tell, right? Like, if you put them up against something that's almost impossible to defeat, are you going to be the one that stands at the end and helps the players win? Or are you going to be the one that runs? Questions like that are something you start throwing at your players, and then they start going, oh, wow, I didn't think about it on that long range scale. And to me, I think that's where these big stories are telling amazing tales, is because of that. They're the long, they're the long game. Yeah. And I'm telling you, as a game master, I'm almost to the point where I don't like the long game anymore. It's so much prep work. It is
a lot of prep work.
Intense. We're moving to short form campaigns in the next probably for 2025, because, you know, I can prep a 8-12 episode series to tell one full story, but then I need time between those
Right.
to understand what is my journey, what is my plan. But I think 8 to 12 episodes is a great way to state like book one, you know,
Yeah.
and book 1 to book 2 don't have to be back to back.
Yeah.
You know, I can do this 12 episodes, and then the next time they go up to play the game again, we're 9 months in, or we're 2 years in, and it's not going to change anything else other than you now have all that time that when you come back to the table, you get to tell those stories, because they're going to affect things in a different way. So
I think that, yeah, I was very hesitant early on with the idea of like episodic type D&D. But even playing in the game that I get to play with you kind of changed my mind on that, because even in a single session where you can have a story arc,
right.
You can have a single piece of a story with the character and go in and out of this world that already exists in just a brief episode. I had just as much fun as a long form story game. Right. And I think those episodic type games can be just as rewarding, especially if you can't be there all the time. Like, I know how many times as adult lives happen to be where people can't be at a game, and you know, do you cancel the game if 1 or 2 people can't show up, or what are they going to miss? Are they going to be able to come back to the story? But if you're playing sort of episodic adventurers, you don't run into the same challenge there. I like that.
And I think that allows more people to play consistently by doing it that way, because then there isn't as much of that cancel, or, well, I guess this week we aren't going to play our normal campaign. We're going to go to some other one shot. But if that's the case, then now we're doing an episodic thing over here, you know, where I think those abilities to be like, hey guys, we're slotting 4 weeks. This is going to be our arc, right? This is our next arc, and this is the goal. And I think once you start getting those players, when they get the Gandalf moment where he says, hey, I need you to go here and do this. And your players buy into it. And that's the biggest thing, is that all the players have to buy into something like that, or those episodic adventures just are not going to be as enjoyable. The cool thing about episodic adventures is they don't have to be episodic and done. That's the cool part.
Yeah, true.
You know, you can start sprinkling in, or players can start telling backstory information or building relationships, even if it is only 4 episodes, you know, any 4 sessions. And then now the cool thing is let's say I did my 4 sessions, we took a 2-month break, we come back, we decided we're not going to stay in this same location. Now I can say, okay, hey guys, it's been 3 months. What were you guys doing during that time? And allow them to use those tools that Dungeons and Dragons has had built into it for ages for downtime. You know, when we talk about, I wanted to build a magic item. Cool. Who did you go work with? Where did you go? What was the concept? And just let them tell their own story for 20 minutes. And then once you get those, you write those things down. And then when that happens, you might have now a new NPC or a new area of the world that you didn't flush out, but your player, just out of their vignette of back, you're now like, oh wow, now I've got 6 NPCs in a world area that I can either mess with, or that I can let the story be already told. You know, okay, no other reason to go back to the town of Riverbend other than there's an amazing fisherman there, and he taught the warrior how to fish. Yeah. And that's it. For the last 2 months, he went to Riverbend and taught the warrior how to fish down the river. Yeah. That's it. And but what else do I explore with this? Well, now I've got, you know, he's got fishing abilities now, so he's got a skill that he can utilize during his game. He also we have a town now that is a fishing village, so now we know, hey, if they're in the area, maybe they need a place to crash, so they can crash there. And you don't have to come up with an NPC name because they gave you the fisherman's name. So you've got all these things you can pull from just out of giving that space, that open air that we don't expect to have.
And it is And it is at that point where it is truly a collaborative game.
Correct.
They're telling the story along with you. It's not, they're just not being guided along on your story, but it's a group of people creating a world and creating a story together. And it's so much more beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, this is an awesome conversation. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can interact with you, and closing thoughts?
Sure, yeah. So right now, you can find us over at Tabletop Misfits on Twitch and YouTube. You can find me at Tabletop Misfits, all one word, on Instagram. We're currently reopened our Discord. We had a full reform on that one. So go check us out over on Discord. You can get links on that from both our YouTube and Twitch channel. And and if you really want to support us in any way, shape, or form, the best way to do it is the free stuff, like, share, comment. And if you can offer a couple extra dollars, please toss it towards our very small Patreon. We only have one form right now. It's a thank you. And that's all we're asking is, a couple bucks to help keep the lights on, to cover some of the subscriptions with like Zoom and Incarnate and things like that. And if we do see a growth in things, then maybe we'll start doing things such as, behind the scenes or after hour events, private games, things like that. Other than that, closing remarks is going to be 2025 is a big year for the Misfits. We're already working on 3 different projects. We've re-signed our agreement with Free League Publishing, so we're going to be doing an 8-episode adventure in Moria for their expansion set, I'm super excited. As a Lord of the Rings fanatic, it's so excited to return back to Middle Earth. And then you can find me on Monday nights at 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over at Gen Con TV, where we're continuing our story in Icewind Dale. And surprisingly, we have 2 big things coming up next year that I didn't expect. One, I will be media and interviewing people at the Philadelphia Tabletop Expo in January, going through their creators, their game masters, players, asking those same questions that we do on Tavern Talks. And then if it's an opportunity, which we're currently in the process of working, there's going to be a D&D weekend in North Carolina where we'll be collaborating with the Weathered Dragon, who makes customized gaming tables.
Awesome.
And I'll be running a 3-day adventure for him and a bunch of people that are willing to camp out down there. And we're going to kind of do our own little small version of D&D in a castle.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Yeah.
But we went down and saw them last weekend and met them for the first time and put a whole bunch of pictures up. And the first question was, when can we come play? And I was offered as tribute to be the first game master for that. So nice. That's what I'm looking forward to in 2025.
Well, James, it's always been a pleasure to interact with you digitally. Today was awesome because I got to meet you in person for the first time. So this was really exciting. And I appreciate you coming on the show and hanging out. This was a lot of fun.
Definitely. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Cyclith. We'll see you next time.